We'll see how the Pacific Locomotive Association has taken great pains to make the Niles Canyon Railroad look and feel much like it did when the first telegraph poles were installed there over 100 years ago.
It doesn't take a lot of imagination to picture what it was like here back in the 1880s, when the first passenger train barreled through this canyon. All you have to do is look and listen. It doesn't seem as though much has changed here, but in the world of railroading, everything is different. We're in the Niles Canyon of Alameda County, California, just 34 rail miles outside of San Francisco. The Central Pacific Railroad finished track construction through the canyon in 1869. Eventually, it became part of the Southern Pacific System and used as a secondary line. Because the SP decided to focus its energy and resources elsewhere, very little rebuilding programs touched the canyon. That's why you can still see much of the original cut stone bridge abutments and retaining walls. Steam locomotives pulled trains through Niles Canyon for 80 years before diesels took over in the 1950s. And in 1984, the Southern Pacific stopped operations here altogether and pulled up the tracks. That might have been the end of the Niles Canyon Railroad forever if it hadn't been for the Pacific Locomotive Association. Its members wanted to preserve this particular piece of railroad history, to let the general public find out what they always knew. Nothing can beat a ride on a steam locomotive through a California canyon.
The canyon's really a unique place in California to run trains. It's fairly undeveloped because of the rugged terrain. It's not seen the population growth that other parts of California have enjoyed. Passengers on the train ride will see history dating back to the time of the Spanish first European settlers that came in and displaced the native population that was here. Some of the relics of the famous bandito Joaquin Murrieta. In addition to the rail line, the first transcontinental railroad had part of its construction the first telegraph line from coast to coast. And some of the remnants of that early telegraph are still visible in the canyon with the unique square telegraph poles that were carved or cut out of giant redwood logs and used to string the telegraph wire through the canyon. In the seasonal changes in the canyon, it's quite spectacular, the difference between the brilliant green hillsides in the spring with the brightly colored wildflowers, and then in the summer all that turns to golden brown grazing land on the hills. In the winter, it's cool and misty and foggy, and it's really a beautiful place to recreate.
It took more than a year for volunteers to rebuild the rail line between Sunol and Brightside. And finally, in 1988, passenger operations returned to Niles Canyon. Now, more than 40 years after it was created, the Pacific Locomotive Association has more than 700 volunteers and plenty of work to keep them busy.
Of those 700, I would estimate a good 125 are active in restoration of equipment and the operation, running the depot. And as backgrounds, most of these people have not had railroad background, but they come from all walks of life. We have plumbers and carpenters, we have doctors and lawyers, just a full range, men and women.
Thanks to the volunteers' hard work, everyone can get a chance to ride behind a steam locomotive through the canyon. The trains can be chartered for school trips and parties. There have even been some weddings on board.
Well, the weddings and the parties that we have, we'll take, and usually people will charter a train. They'll charter the entire train. Some of them want steam power, some of them want diesel power. You can go from car to car, you can enjoy the scenery, you can also bring aboard whatever you want in the way of snacks. You can charter a caboose. Great thing for parties for limited numbers, perhaps 20, 25 people on the caboose. Great for kids, they get a chance to really ride inside a real caboose, climb up in the cupola.
The PLA has plenty of plans for the future. At the town of Niles, they hope to build a railroad museum with an interpretive center, a roundhouse, and equipment on display. But while you're riding through the canyon, It's easy to forget about the future and any worries of the modern age.
They're amazed that we're so close to large centers of population, but it's almost like you're out in the Wild West.